Good afternoon and welcome to today's Adweek webinar, The Future of Social Commerce, where we'll be talking about how to embrace the consumer choice revolution. Today's webinar is sponsored by Inmar. I'm Danielle Moore, Senior Manager of Webinars here at Adweek's Content Studio, and I'll be your host today. Before we begin, I want to take a moment just to make sure everyone knows what to expect from today's webinar and is familiar with the features of our platform. The actual presentation should go somewhere in the 30 to 35 minute range, after which we will have time for audience Q&A. So if at any point you have a question for our speakers, just use the Q&A tool beneath the video window on your screen, and we'll get to as many of your questions as we can after the end of the presentation. Also, it's not too late to invite your colleagues to join us at today's webinar. About 15 minutes ago, you received a final reminder email from us. In there, you'll find a link to the webinar registration page that you can share with your colleagues. There's still plenty of time for them to join us live today, but if they can't, today's webinar is being recorded, and they can always catch the on-demand version. In fact, that on-demand recording will be available to all registrants, and we'll be sending you a link to that later today when it's live, around 3:30 Eastern. And if you would like a PDF of today's slide deck, we'll be sending that out with the on-demand link as well, so keep an eye out for that. As always, if you enjoy today's webinar, definitely check out the full Adweek webinars calendar at adweek.com/webinars. You'll see what we have coming up and also get access to our archive of on-demand webinars. Now, let me introduce you to today's speakers. We're very excited to be joined by Leah Logan, VP Media Products Strategy and Marketing at Inmar Intelligence. Leah leads strategy and commercialization for Inmar's influencer marketing, conversational commerce, and retail activation media. Prior to joining Inmar, Leah led the marketing efforts for all Dr. Pepper, Snapple Group, DVSG brands at Walmart. We're also very pleased to be joined by Cedric Harris, Brand Director at Procter & Gamble. Cedric is focused on innovating current marketing strategies to win the underserved multicultural shopper. Before his current role at P&G, he led digital strategy for Clearblue and media strategy for Dawn. We've got some fantastic content to dive into today, so let me bring Leah and Cedric up on screen to get us started here. Leah, Cedric, thank you so much for being with us today.
Hello.
Yes. Hello. Thank you, Danielle. I'm happy to be here today. Cedric and I are both fighting the allergy craziness that's happening right now, so bear with us as we go through that, but happy to be here. We're really excited to be presenting together today. One of the things that you saw on the title slide was all about embracing consumers and consumer choices. And, I'm just so, happy to see our kind of joint company mission statements next to each other and just so aligned in terms of, how do we improve the lives of consumers?
I think that's what's going to be really great for Leah and I as we continue to have this conversation, is that where it all started is where our missions are really aligned on improving consumers' lives. So with that being said, that then tends to drive to all the work that we've actually worked on together, but all the great research that's been led by Inmar.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't show this slide like I show in every presentation about social commerce. The growth is amazing in terms of, almost 5% of total retail e-commerce sales in 2 years. One thing I want to mention here, and I continue to mention, Forrester and eMarketer continue to disagree with me, I guess, is that this is such a small portion of actual social commerce sales. There are so many people who are influenced by social that, go into a store or take a screenshot or pin something or save it or screenshot or whatever it might be, that's not showing up in these numbers. So although I do think, the growth is substantial and impressive, it's also extremely narrowly focused.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really actually interesting is, since we're a manufacturer, so a lot of our products are actually sold through our retail partners of various capacities, whether that's .com, e-commerce, and also within the brick and mortar. Every different retailer is on their different omni journey, whether they're focused on driving store traffic, so getting people actually in the store to surprise and delight them, or really, really trying to get them to get delivery right to their doorstep in the fastest amount of time. So with that being said, we kind of try to understand, how does social commerce work when maybe not necessarily their focus is actually on driving to a buy here now to be delivered to their door, but also while they're trying to learn about what kind of products they want to buy later when they know they're going to do their annual or weekly pickup at the store.
So just kind of starting off in the time spent realm, one thing that's really interesting that we've seen in our consumer research, and Inmar's actually been tracking several of these trends, whether it's time spent, platform or format, popularity. We do a lot of different demographic and kind of psychographic cuts. One thing to point out is that we are seeing users spend less time on social, and that's not because they're not interested. It's not because they're not satisfied. It's that they're able to get so much more out of their social experience in a shorter period of time. So, you're seeing a 40% decrease in the kind of 10 to 13 or more hours per week. But ultimately, we are still seeing, engagement. We are still seeing users, coming back and accessing those platforms. One thing we're going to talk about in more depth throughout the rest of this presentation is around short form content, and that's really what's driving that decline. And I know Cedric gets really hard on marketers because now they have very much less time to tell their stories.
Well, it's really interesting because I like you mentioned, it's like hard on marketers, because what we're have to continue to do is really adapt to what is happening in the ecosystem where people are choosing to spend their time. As you mentioned, short form, it continues to be a major piece. So, how do we take all our big videos and make them into something that makes sense from a short form audience? But I'm guessing too, for you guys, Leah, you guys do a lot of research on how the industry trends have changed, what that looks like. But it's curious to see what this same, when you run the same test in 6 months, where those numbers are even going to address. So it's constantly evolving on. It's even harder for the researchers nowadays to keep up on what we're trying to learn and what we're trying to react to.
Absolutely. Hard out here for us marketers.
Yeah.
And entering our stats from 22 in terms of what people are currently doing, and then in 2023 what they expect to be doing, and a couple of notables here. We are looking at increases in time spent with certain age groups, more specifically on TikTok and YouTube. And again, that really does speak to those kind of short form video formats, whereas you see kind of the monsters, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, they're going to be looking at the most steep declines in 2023. And some of that is, privacy and environmental concerns. But some of that is just, the formats that they're providing are just not as engaging. I mean, people are still using those platforms to stay connected, but the entertainment value is decreasing. The other thing to note here, and it's because it's so near and dear to my heart, is Pinterest. Pinterest doesn't get a whole lot of love, but what we're seeing here is that, there's a slight decline in use less for 2022, but in terms of planning to use less in 2023, that number is falling below that of a lot of the other giants. And I think a lot of that is the investment that Pinterest is making in terms of kind of shopping capabilities and kind of the seamless e-commerce features.
So Leah, what was your moving progression over the last year? So I was really big on Snap. I'm like barely Snap on now. So I've moved from my Facebook focus to Instagram to really dabbling in Snap, stepping away from Snap, now spending too much time on TikTok, and actually focusing on YouTube. And so it's interesting as a marketer, because as you're moving in those platforms, you're kind of talking through yourself like, hold on a second, why don't I see myself or my brands here? This is where I'm spending my time. So sometimes that help becomes like a symbiotic relationship on why you want to react, just because we want our ads to show up where we actually like to play. But what was your journey? See, I'm not huge on Pinterest. So I kind of missed that moment.
Missed that
But maybe
window.
maybe when I move or redecorate my closet or something, maybe that's be my breakthrough in.
That was for me. I mean, Pinterest was a big one for me. We built a house, and I will tell you that Pinterest was my best friend because I would find all these beautiful looks, and I'd be like, "Look at this couch; it's gorgeous, but it's $3,000." And Pinterest is like, "Look at this couch that you can buy that's $500," or "Look at this couch." I've got small kids, so it's where $3,000 couches are not in the cards right now because they would be ruined in 10 minutes. But I'm also in the TikTok hole. I think what's interesting is that every platform has a place. And when we look at Facebook specifically and Instagram, they do still have those strong connector vibes. Like it really is about understanding what's going on in friends and families' lives. But entertainment within the TikTok space or within the YouTube space, to a degree, Pinterest, although Pinterest is really more inspiration versus kind of raw entertainment. I think we'll continue to talk throughout this presentation that every platform can drive growth and value, but you do have to customize your approach to kind of what the platform is used
Very
for,
much so.
as well as, to the audience you're trying to reach with your brands.
Yeah, it's interesting as you're moving through that journey with how users are moving through the platform, and then how people evolve to use your products in different way, whether that's from the point of market entry of you trying to get them to start using your product and they might be using a certain platform during that time, to the late in years where you might try to get them to premiumize or going to a more effective or faster or better version, and where they're actually going to be in that user cycle for their own personal use.
Well, and I think what you're bringing up is, bringing us to our next slide, which is, e-commerce and shopping integrations within the social space are absolutely impacting social platform usage. I think we've seen as users and our end consumers are seeing the same thing. They're condensing their journey. They're wanting to spend their time efficiently and effectively. And if they are, looking to create that inspired e-commerce journey, they're going to walk away if it's not a great experience. So, those platforms who are taking the time to integrate and create, like Pinterest, again, here's all the things that you would like if you like this bedroom picture. Those are the ones that are going to win from a commerce perspective.
Yeah, it is where we're kind of matching where we're spending our time with the amount of money you're spending. So really thinking about when we're doing like a media plan or a media launch for some of those big innovation projects where we're spending your time, making sure they're actually matching up to where people are actually behaving or acting. So whether that's focusing more on digital rather than linear or traditional TV, or whether that is being really focused on TV because that's where that shopper is spending their time, it's very interesting that we kind of most effective and the best way is trying to get that one-to-one to match for the amount of time and the amount of money you spend to actually reach that shopper.
Yeah, I feel like we should have titled this presentation like "It's Hard Out Here for a Marketer." We have a fun slide with lots of bubbles on it later that show like all the complexity. But just a quick call out on this slide. Obviously, we know that social is driving purchase, and we'll talk a little bit about the types of purchasing in the next slide. Facebook's going to continue to be a giant here just because of the investments made to make it easy to shop. So there are Facebook shops, there's Facebook Wallet. There are ways that you can directly transact within the platform itself. And obviously, easy ways to link over and transact in another commerce environment as well. So, until some of the other platforms like a TikTok, who really only enables commerce in a very select kind of beta offering with their integrations with Shopify, like there's so much time being spent there and so much opportunity, but they just haven't made it easy on the consumer.
Yeah, I think one of the things that when we are understanding where we should continue to make choices on how we market to our shoppers and what avenues that we leverage, um, I always turn onto what return on investment or ROI, as opposed um, to better understand, should we be focusing on this area, and then how can we better understand the ROI? So there are some difficulties when you're working with walled gardens to really directly drive that to sales. So then in the end, we're using essentially different proxies to better understand like how effective it is outside of just the impressions of the amount of people we reach, but have we actually converted them to either put that item in their basket and purchase, or to make that trip to the store and pick it up in the counter when they realize that new item that we've been talking about is there. So it really does continue to be a big ROI conversation moving forward on how we can continue to talk through where we when we're talking specifically about purchasing a product, to make sure that we can link that. We know that the shopper is inspired by all these different venues in different ways, depending on the product and the category. Um, how do we prove that out? And usually that's our ROI through sales and actual conversion. And then there's different ways that we're kind of net trying to circumvent some areas when, especially if there's a walled garden or you don't have a direct click here, buy now here campaign where you can really track that full through line.
And I think that that is a great transition into the next slide. I think part of the challenge with social and tracking is that you're right, the walled gardens make it extremely difficult, unless you have a great partner like Inmar. One of the things that's important to note is that the purchasing, from social exposure is highly, highly incremental. And if you think about that just as a user, you understand why, right? You're not going into an e-commerce site or a Google and typing in the search bar, like find some shoes or find these jeans or, couch or whatever it might be. You're browsing a social site and you're seeing something that catches your eye and you're inspired to want to learn more and find out more. Like where do I buy it? How much does it cost? Whatever it is. I think the challenge is that in many cases, and we're showing here about 40%, people don't make those purchases right away. They're making those purchases at least a week later. So, whether it's taking a screenshot or saving the link or making a note or putting it on a, add to list or add to cart, there's a ton of breakage there when we're talking about the walled gardens.
Well, I do like your comment on incrementality, because that's really where we see the opportunity, call it the growth of your brands or your platforms, because we know that if it's incremental because sometimes we're marketing to people who would have bought your product anyway. They've already been excited about it, they're delighted about it, they're already aware about it, they considered it, and then inevitably they were going to convert. It's really getting those additional incremental shoppers to really grow either your household penetration or your items or whatever you call it, key KPIs for driving growth is. I think will continue to be really, really interesting as we specifically talk about incrementality. And to your point, and when we're thinking about attribution, and we can talk about whether it should be 14 days or 30 days, or maybe it's just based on the cycle of your product, because maybe it's only a product that you need, like when you exactly need it and you don't know what that time is. Like when I worked on pregnancy tests, you might think you might need one, but you might not need one. So Those are kind of one of the interesting nuances of how we better understand. So, for example, I'm going on a trip, and me and my friend are buying lederhosen, so we can really do
Where
Oktoberfest
are you
right.
going?
We'll be
Yes.
in Munich, but we really want to do it right. So I've definitely been getting targeted ads for some different brands of lederhosen that we purchase. And so while I have put some in my cart, we actually haven't pulled the trigger, for lack of a better phrase, to actually pull the item that we're going to exactly do. So it's kind of interesting. While these ads have drive me and eventually will drive me to convert, because I do want to show up looking my best self in lederhosen. Um, but I actually haven't made that purchase. But I've been inspired by a couple of designs that I've been seeing and call it the searching window. So I talked a little bit about incrementality, continue important based on whatever your brands or products KPIs. But then two, that attribution window is always one of the interesting things that can continue to get a little bit tangled and make it a little bit harder for you to understand that ROI in the end.
Well, and first and foremost, I'm going to need some photos at some point in time. And secondly, um, secondly, I think that I'm going to use this as a transition. This is me. I'm going to ninja transition into, incrementality is also based on product discovery, right? And I think that obviously from an in-store perspective, we're going to continue to see in-store as kind of that key driver of product discovery because we do see, the curation of what many retailers don't get credit for. And also, there are certain categories that you do want to touch, feel, try on. Even certain categories that you're just not going to have shipped, like maybe you're not going to have your crackers shipped to you, and it's something you want to go to the grocery store and buy with your produce. But what I do want to point out is that social media is ranked as the second place in which people discover, and I feel like seeing some sort of ad on a retail site, which I don't know what retail sites sell lederhosen, but is going to be less impactful than if you're scrolling through, Instagram, or you're searching, Oktoberfest hashtags and you see a look put together. Like, that's inspirational. That's where you're going to say, I like this look. I want to look like this. I want to put this thing together. So, the real match made in heaven in, future state is really going to be where the retail environment and the social environment overlap.
We definitely continue to see that one of the biggest awareness drivers of products or new innovation or brands is that in-store piece. Actually, a person seeing it on the shelf for the first time, or a display, or an end cap. I do think we can expand that to the digital shelf as people are sometimes shopping by category and not necessarily specifically by brand, and learning in that way. But we continue to see that being one of the biggest awareness drivers, which is important. So while we're thinking about how we're driving awareness and how the in-shelf is at shelf, whether digitally or in retail brick and mortar, continues to be a important part of the awareness driver. It's interesting that the social piece continues to gain more and more traction just by the nature of us sharing our data from all our different lives and people better understanding what interests and what you will really react to, with all the algorithm work and machine learning work, to actually serve you that new item that they think you can resonate with. So it's cool to see that gap is closing, that you don't necessarily need to be on the shelf to help drive that awareness of your new product or innovation or advancement.
Well, and a lot of that is because, and I am not one to read sites, but this one, 42% of shoppers say that short form videos have inspired them to purchase, much more than, almost 20% more than any other format. I think is the reason why we see that gap closing. People are spending time. We know it's the preferred or the preferred format at this time. They're looking for that like social discovery experience. And then, in many cases, you saw in the last slide, you had, categories like beauty or apparel or electronics. They're right on par with in store, if not, almost equal. So I do think short form video is kind of changing the game in terms of social commerce and just the impact we're able to make.
Very much so. I have not even much to add. It's very interesting just on how we have our own consumption. We're really focusing, I know personally, I'm really focused on a lot of short form video as my entertainment meets my entertainment needs. But we do know that shoppers have less and less time to want to understand or learn. So figuring out what's the best way to teach them about sometimes maybe really complex product in a very short amount of time, or a really nuanced brand in a very short amount of time.
And, we talk a lot about TikTok because obviously Cedric and I love TikTok, and got some links I'll probably send you later today. YouTube Shorts is not far behind. We are continuing to see Shorts grow. Shorts has actually increased in daily views by about 5x since 2020. And some of that is because of an investment made towards creators. They put out a $100 million creator fund to really kind of get the fire started in terms of people spending time with Shorts. And the other is obviously they, started in beta release outside of, the US and some of the other Pacific countries, and obviously expanded to the US in the last year. The one thing to point out is that Reels is so far behind kind of both of them, almost 10% behind Shorts. And you wouldn't think that based on, just how prevalent Reels is within the platform. And I think a lot because most people are seeing the same content on TikTok and Reels and Facebook Reels. But YouTube, in a survey we did with our creators, many of our creators will do a completely separate video for YouTube, even if it's the same product and the same campaign. They are looking for a different aesthetic, a different angle for YouTube versus the other two.
Yeah, I can definitely see how my personal video media consumption can reflect similar percentages of where I actually spend my time for my short form video.
We're learning so much about Cedric today. We're all learning a ton about Cedric.
I did not expect to be talking about lederhosen. I don't know how I got that in there.
You blacked out, and here we are. The thing to note, and Cedric and I are not sharing our ages with you today, so no need to make that relatable. But TikTok to me and to many marketers has always screamed like, oh, it's only young people. It's just going to be there's teens looking for dance videos. You can see that the 45 to 54-year-old age group is as large as the 18 to 24-year-old age group. And with that stat around short form video driving purchase, I think many marketers are missing the boat here in terms of that's the age group that actually has money to buy stuff. So I would say, don't cut yourself short in terms of how you look at these platforms and kind of what they're set up to do. There's absolutely customization strategies from a creative as well as targeting standpoint to kind of maximize impact across any and all kind of cohorts that we're listing here.
Yeah, it does really continue to inform how you continue to break that out and what makes sense for your shopper and who is your audience that you're trying to target with your product. As we see the evolution of what becomes the, call it, trend of social media, it continues to vary, but then it also continues to vary within your age segment. So what might have been the best place to market a product 2 years ago might still not be the best place to market that product or the best place to market that product today. So it's continually ever evolving. making it a little bit more difficult to decide on one media plan to act on for the entire year when we need to continue to optimize on a monthly, almost a monthly basis.
And speaking of evolutions, Cedric, we are putting you in this on the spot here to talk a little bit about how to get into short form video. I know that we have some brands out there that are still trying to figure out, what's their angle and how do they integrate, and some brands that are concerned about brand safety and brand messaging, and why not learn from the best?
So I'm like kind of highlighting my call it own personal journey on what that looked like from really getting into short form video as a place to market and promote our brands or products. But so essentially, back in the day when I first joined the team, we really just took what we already had, the assets we already created, which was usually a TV spot or a digital OLV or OTT spot. So one of those 15-second or 30-second, and just cutting it down to fit that format. So that was call it the evolution. When we were having that continued focus on ROI, and I would say P&G and myself out as well really like to help be great storytellers and telling why our products and brands are the best for whatever may be the situation that you're focusing on to help improve consumers' lives. What we realized is that while the story was great for a 30-second spot, it might not have been great cut down into 6 seconds. So then we're like, well, we're not good at making, or I'm not good at making, I personally can't do a great Snapchat or even TikTok. So hopefully nobody finds me on that platform to see what I put out there. But so then we really reached out to call it our traditional professional agencies to help develop that creative. What was the nuance to that is that we call it taking the template of taking what we've done on TV or more of our long form places and pushed it onto another platform where that might not necessarily work. So then it tends to be a little bit more expensive. There's a little bit more production value. It might not look very native to the platform. So we're kind of like, well, you know what? How about we focus on the people who can actually do it, the people who live in this platform day to day, the videos that we love to watch. Why aren't they should probably actually be making those spots and telling the stories for us within obviously the parameters that we see fit. So moving away from getting big production to develop a call it TikTok video to actually getting the creators to really focus on getting something that feels native and can resonate with either their following or even a greater following. And then, so now taking all that and then continuing to scale it and adapting it and optimizing it and then leveraging the platforms for whatever your KPIs to help drive that.
And we included a couple examples so you guys can
Oh, we
see.
did.
Yes.
This is a throwback. So I remember a part of that launch, Clear Blue, since a lot of people want a negative result for their tests. So really making sure that that was clear in the creative, somebody being excited actually not to have a negative result, since traditionally the focus was always on the positive result being the only great solution.
This fun one. This cracks me up.
Yeah, the importance of getting creators to do it as opposed to, trying to get somebody else to shoehorn their examples into a platform that might be native. So really trying to find a new way as we continue to become really more fragmented, because these are platforms that are natively very different. And you could, yes, use one piece of copy to cover across all platforms and make sure they are 9:16 and the right sizes and all that kind of stuff, have volume. But that necessarily doesn't help tell the story to help drive that conversion at the purchase cart. So we then know that what we need to do is put our best foot forward. And sometimes we need to find a better way to do that more efficiently instead of calling it building big productions for now 5 different platforms that we need to reach people with 5 different messages because the key benefits are different for their age groups. So harping back to Leah's, it's hard out here for a marketer trying to make it a little bit simpler by continue to have that focus on ROI, but then incrementality, and then making sure that we have enough content, and then we're reaching the right shopper. We can go on and on. These are, call it, just a couple of bullets that really focus on all the different things that we're taking in consideration specifically for short form video. The one I probably will really highlight is what has been a personal focus for me was really making sure that creating content that reaches the multicultural shopper and continues to resonate her to make sure she's very represented within our creative. Reach her where she is, because that might actually be a different breakout based on the platform and what multicultural identity that they stick with. And then 2, making sure that the message continues to be relevant. So there's a lot to think about when we're really trying to win with short form video. As we know, it continues to be a driver for social commerce as people try to drive awareness in all those different pieces.
Even though there was a lot to cover on the last slide of all the things we have to do as marketers to make our lives hard, but make our consumers' lives better, it is possible. So we're sharing a case study here in partnership with P&G, Blue Chip, and Inmar. Cedric, if you want to give us a quick highlight on kind of what you were challenged with and trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I think one of the cool things about this program is that we really wanted to reach that shopper where she was, but give her a message that was resonant with her. And that's where Call It the Scholarship program came about. And what we did is focus on delivering supporting a scholarship for the UNCF, United Negro College Fund, to get students into HBCUs, and leveraging our beauty brands to help promote that opportunity for the shoppers. And the Roll Say itself, it really drove some great sales, but one of the coolest things is we're able to really impact the community. We met our, call it, application goal very early in. I think it was like week 3 of our campaign. So we were very excited to see, 1, the engagement around the campaign, 2, being able to give back for the community, being a force for growth and good, and 3, making sure that we had a message that resonated with her. She knew we were working to be a servant of that community, which was very important for us in that overall project. The benefit is that it did deliver some increased resonance with our brands, which then in turn they paid it forward by purchasing us at the register. But I think that's just giving a little bit of example. What I think how this really comes back into our social commerce is we made sure that we were really specific on where we were reaching her, making sure she was represented. And the weights of our campaign focused pretty heavily on social, knowing that they and a lot of those shoppers over indexed in those particular platforms.
I think the other really cool thing was using the student athletes. So Inmar does have a student athlete community, and we very specifically chose student athletes that were in the communities that P&G was trying to target. And what's unique about student athletes is, not only are they going to speak and resonate with shoppers of that age, shoppers who probably have kids or are kids that need scholarships and buy deodorant, but also the student athletes have very localized followings in terms of the kind of geo-effectiveness of student athletes. It's going to be substantially higher than your traditional influencer. So I think there were, a few strategic reasons to use athletes. But, one of which was obviously this worked out really well in terms of the overall messaging for the campaign.
Yeah, that was a great build onto that.
So I'm going to wrap us up here with a couple of takeaways so we can get to questions. Cedric and I, wanted to put out here a little now, next, and beyond. And beyond would take an amazing crystal ball because stuff is changing, like as we're sitting in this webinar. For right now, we would just say, please use short form video if you're not already using it. You're definitely missing out. This is where people are being influenced. And you saw the stat earlier. 42% are actually driving a purchase from seeing a short form video. Next up, go ahead.
Yeah, Leah, to Leah's point, Kali really driving to like, oh, what can I do today? Like, I just hung out with you guys and talked to you. Like, how do I actually bring that to action in my day-to-day job or agency work, whatever that looks like? And I think one is, if you're not already doing short form, start. And two, if you are really focusing on like, where is the right place to play and what is the right weight and investment level should I be doing it? So the goal, I think, not in this conversation, would be like, you should only be doing short form. You should be spending all your time and energy on short form. We know that it takes a whole ton of stuff together to actually get a shopper to buy your product. But I think call it one thing that we like you to take out of this is like, if you're not doing a whole bunch of short form video or exploring short form video to see if your product's even right for it, then that should be something that we can start today.
And I think the next is layering on top of that in terms of making sure you've got multiple forms, making sure you've got the right kind of creative variations, the right representation, and understanding how to use things like data integration and optimization technology to really power up those videos and power up the impact of those videos.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the beyond is, for me as a marketer, especially being very passionate in the social space, I think sometimes we focus too much on social within social. The impact of a person showing you how to use a product or endorsing a product or, putting together some sort of solution doesn't have to just be found within a social environment. I think we need to start blurring the lines more. We need to take social outside of social and really inspire people in the moments that they're going to be most receptive. So, for us, we want to do more of integrating with some of the other media channels out there.
Yeah, Leah, I mentioned that, call it storytelling piece. Really, there's a bunch of places where you can be doing storytelling. We talked about short form video in this session because it's growing importance and opportunity for our marketers. But that's not the only place. And we foresee that won't be the only place where this is going to be a great opportunity.
All right, with that, I am going to turn it back over to Danielle for some questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of those insights, Leah and Cedric. I have to say that was such a complex topic, right? To your point of all that goes into this, we touched on usage, time spent, purchase journeys on social, the creator economy, short form video in under an hour, and so succinctly and approachably for our audience. So I'm excited to get to these questions. I think folks will have a lot to think about from here. As we mentioned, we do have time to take a few audience questions, and we'll get to as many as we can before the end of the presentation, 5 or 10 minutes or so. And if we don't get to your question, audience members, please just know that we always make sure they get forwarded over to our sponsor so they have the opportunity to possibly reply offline. A couple of quick reminders from Adweek before we get started with the questions. Today's webinar has been recorded and will be available on demand later this afternoon. So we'll be emailing everyone a link to that recording as well as the slides. I know some folks have been asking for those. Keep an eye out for those in the email. And if you'd like a copy of today's slides, again, those will be sent out later. So keep an eye out for that. Now let's get to some questions. First question here, speaking of short form and the rise of that and how strongly the two of you have recommended, this being a space that folks get into if they're not in that space already. Are you concerned with brand safety on platforms like TikTok? I'll throw that to you first, Leah.
Well, I'm going to give you my a client perspective with many of the clients, and I think Cedric will probably have a better answer than I will. But there are concerns about brand safety across social, and I would say, many of our clients work with us because we do have agreements where we can take content down quickly, or we can, address something happening in some sort of a comment window or within chats. So I think that the opportunity cost of not participating in these platforms is far greater than the brand safety risk.
Yeah,
Got
so
it. Cedric, any thoughts there?
yeah, I would just add just really being choiceful for where you place and promote your products, depending on where your focus are and what you guys are working towards. So just take the opportunity to be choiceful and thinking about that. But then just to Leah's point, just making sure that you have safeguards in place in case something does go wrong, that you can react really quickly at the speed of light, which is the speed of when social evolves.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. I love that turn of phrase, choiceful, as opposed to just purposeful. Like, really, there are so many choices in this space. So I appreciate that. Next question. How should brands use social platforms differently? So, for example, TikTok versus Instagram. I feel like this is an age-old question, and it continues to evolve as these platforms evolve. Leah, what are your thoughts there?
I think what you saw from our slides is that it's a combination that's very difficult. Again, marketing's hard, of understanding what the platform's kind of key purposes are, which we have that data. We know where people go to connect versus entertain versus, get inspiration versus purchase. But then you saw those cuts in terms of different demographics, and then even different formats by demographic. So I think it's really important to understand the audience that you're trying to reach, and then work backwards into kind of where and how.
Cedric?
Yeah, I think I think usually most of the time it's how you tell the story. So if your benefit is making it up, if it's a product with a really value-based benefit, value could be perceived very differently based on the platform you're using and the age group you're using. So you're really maybe not telling a fully different story, and you're just tailoring the story to the right person. I think it's more how you kind of vary. So I'm saying you probably should continue to use most of them. Just your story needs to be adapted to how that platform comes to life.
Got it. Great thoughts from both there. Our next question, what's the key role influencers play in bringing to life a social strategy centered around short form video? I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but we'd love to hear any additional thoughts, Leah.
I'm going to let Cedric start with this one and add color. Obviously, I am extremely passionate about influencers, but I think he's going to have a really nice kind of agnostic perspective here.
Yeah, I think the benefit of influencers kind of varies what KPI you're driving for. So I think there's benefits from where you just want them to develop great content. There's benefits in where you want their audience because it matches and those don't necessarily need to be one and the same all the time. So I think you be thoughtful on how we continue to leverage influencers, and if your campaign needs it. So in some situations, you might really not need a lot of influencers. If you're really just going for mass reach, mass appeal, I want to talk to so many people, and maybe that social might not be the platform for you. So you don't have to make, 7 different messages for all the different major social platforms. Sure. But when you do use influencers, I think they can be very helpful in building in consideration for your product, building content, and they usually have very engaged audiences if those are what you want to tap into.
Got it. Super well said, Cedric. Thank you. Leah, what would you like to add there? I don't have a ton to add. I would say that in many ways, influencers provide a level of advocacy for brands that sometimes it's very difficult to do themselves. Whether it's how to use a product, when to use a product, why to use a product. So I think, in the social space specifically, if you are wanting to reach people who are spending a ton of time engaging and also who are making very incremental purchases, using an influencer as kind of that mouthpiece can be much more effective than just a brand themselves, and can also be, part of a layering strategy as well. It doesn't mean it's kind of one or the other, but I do think matching to KPIs is very important, to Cedric's point. And as long as you can nail down those KPIs, I think there's an influencer strategy to match kind of any and all marketing KPIs out there.
Got it. That is the perfect lead into our next question, which is specifically about KPIs. Since, of course, this is top of mind for a lot of folks in this area. An audience member asks, what type of KPIs should I focus on when it comes to short form video specifically? And more specifically, is sales lift appropriate? Lee, you want to start there?
ROI and incrementality. That's what I focus on. That's, I think, probably the biggest piece, but it's hard to do, which is why it's a key KPI, but sometimes you have to triangulate to get to it, depending on what data you have available, what access you have available. If you're selling through yourself or through somebody else, those are all considerations when you're thinking about it. But I think one of the biggest things is making sure that you're getting that return on investment for your campaign. However that's defined.
I mean, we had a stat that showed, short form video is driving purchases, right? With almost 50% of people. So at the end of the day, I think every marketing campaign is meant to drive some form of sale, right? People don't normally do marketing out of the goodness of their hearts. Sales can absolutely be a goal and an objective, but in terms of kind of KPIs and measurement, sales lift's not always appropriate given what's available in terms of how to track, where to track, how to connect the dots. So I would say, there's an opportunity to do it, obviously. We do it all the time. But I don't think that you should hinder yourself to creating media plans that can be fully measured versus just doing what we know intuitively is the right thing to do to reach the consumer.
Got it. Lots of great thoughts on that front. Thank you so much for all of those insights and takeaways. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for questions today. I'd like to thank our speakers, Leah and Cedric, as well as our sponsor, Inmar. Some final reminders, make sure you check your email for the link to that on-demand recording and the slides from today. Later today, we'll be sending that out around 3:30, so keep an eye out for it. And as always, if you enjoyed today's webinar, be sure to check out the Adweek webinars calendar at adweek.com/webinars. Again, huge thank you to Leah and Cedric. Thank you to our audience for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing everyone at an upcoming Adweek webinar.